Hey everybody, it's Charlie Craven with Fly Fisherman Magazine, and today I'm going to tie for you a fly from a good friend of mine, Keisha Atkin, and this fly is called a Sugar Mama. Keisha is, of note, the only female Umpqua signature fly tyer, which is sort of cool these days. But she and her family have been around the shop endlessly for the last several years, and probably everybody else's shop. They are a fishing family. They travel around a lot. They have become very good anglers and very good fly tyers. She's got two boys, Wes and James, that are spectacular tyers in their own right. Her husband Chris is a great guy. They're just people we love to see around the shop, and I am overjoyed to be able to feature her fly this month. This is the Sugar Mama. This is a jigged streamer that is not tied on a or not tied with a squirrel strip, which is sort of unique on jig streamers. Every other jig streamer I see has got a squirrel or rabbit strip incorporated into it. This fly is sort of tied along the lines of, in my mind, the first thing I thought was a deceiver, using a feather as the body, as a bait fish body, rather than quite so leechy, so small bait fish, feather body with a little flash in there, a little mallard flank for the collar, and then a big Chickabou feather. She uses a spay Chickabou feather on hers, which she has sent me some of, so I'll use that as well. But a Chickabou feather for this collar. Pretty simple fly, all said and done. A few little tricks as you go through tying it, but this is a fly that's going to give you a little different look, maybe a little different perspective. It's not the same old thing that everybody else is throwing either, so you should tie some of these up, and I'm going to show you how. So let's get rid of that one, and I'm going to put my hook in the vise, which is an Umpqua XC400, and I'm going to get you centered up a little bit here. All right, now that I've got us back in focus again, we're going to start with this. This is an XC400 Umpqua hook, and it's got a 3/16 copper slotted tungsten bead on there. We're going to set that bead in place, and we're going to start with some 12/0 Nanosilk, so 50 Denier Nanosilk, just in white. And I'm going to start this just behind the bead here. Get a good tight jam knot on there. You don't want a long tag end here. You want a short tag end because we're not going to dress the entire hook. We're just going to dress just about back to the hook point or so. So where your thread hangs about even with the hook point. And make a couple layers back and forth. I never think it's a bad idea to put a little shot of super glue on a thread base, and I had mine here a second ago. Here it is. We might as well do it since it's handy here. Any Nanosilk thread base, Nanosilk is inherently slippery, so a little shot of glue down on that doesn't hurt things a bit. And if you do it lightly, you don't have to contend with it so much. Kind of trying to fight with it and being sticky the rest of the time. So now for the flash, what I've got mixed here is some UV pearl and silver, angel hair. There's a lot of different materials you can use here, and I've just sort of loosely mixed this up. You can see this is a fine flash, and I've just kind of stacked silver on top of the UV pearl, and I'm going to tie this in about the middle of that thread base, actually. No, I'm not. I'm going to tie it in right up here close to the bead, and I'll explain why here in a second. So I'm going to tie that in at the center of its length, and then fold those two ends back and wrap back over it to the end of that thread base. And you want that to be long. I'll zoom back out here as we progress a bit so that you can kind of see where I'm going with this. But one of the things that I figured out as I was tying these is when I go to tie the wings in, I want this base here where we just doubled that flashback. I want that long enough so that I've got flat profile and even sides so that I can get the feathers tied in nice and neat and evenly without having to fight with an uneven hook arbor, the shank diameter. So for the tails or body, depending on how you look at it, these are two white hen feathers. These are Hebert hen feathers, hen saddle feathers, and I've got two that are pretty evenly shaped. They come off the cape or off the saddle, one right off the top of the other. I've got two of them, and I've measured them just a little bit longer than 2 inches, and I like to strip just a little bit off of one end. Now, Keisha ties these in both at the same time, but I've had better luck tying these in one at a time. And what I'll do with these is I'm going to lay this in alongside the hook and catch it with a couple turns. and anchor it into place there so that that feather should lay flat along that side of the hook. And you can see I've got fluff. I've left the fluff on the bottom. That's going to add some volume to the body of the fly. Then I'm going to take the matched feather that's cut to the same length, and with the curve in again, these are curving in toward the hook, I'm going to lay this in at the same point, even those tips up, and I'll just hold it in place with my thumb and anchor it down as well. You want to make sure that's anchored good and tight, like so. So our tips are even, and we've got those anchored in. Now I'm going to zoom back out and give you the full view here. All right, here we've got a little better view of what we just did with the tails. This is a long fly, but I wanted you to see that up close tie-in on the flash and the wings. So you can see the total length is about 2.5 inches probably when we add the hook in there. Now what we want to do is, and just for this, you can do this at the end, but just for the sake of clarity here, I pull this flash out and sort of loosely, I'm going to cut it raggedly, just a little longer than the feather tail, and leave some of that sticking out. You can see that's sort of ragged and sparkly in there. That's just right, and you can see if I turn this for you, how those feathers are stacked on top of each other. Take a little light off of that, that'll give you a better view. You can see how those feathers are stacked, curving toward each other. We've got that flash in between. All right, get us a little more light back up here. So now we're ready to go on to the sort of undercollar. And what this is Senyo laser dubbing. And this color is, what is this color called? This is Minnow belly, Senyo laser dubbing. So this is a synthetic dubbing with some flash in it. And you want to take this, and let me get this where you can see it here, sort of align it, pull a clump out and just pull it apart and put it back together until you get those fibers aligned. And I've got maybe a little more than I need here. Just keep doing that until you've got it all kind of going the same direction. You don't want anything going, you want them all, for the most part, perpendicular to each other. And then I like to spread that out a little bit. So you should be able to see through that. If I can get that over there on the side, it's a little dense right there. Fairly sparse. And this is sort of tricky here. You want it sparse enough so that it's not going to bulk the fly up hugely, but you do need some volume to it to help stand the collar up that we're about to put in. So I'm going to come up just on top of that thread base, and I'm going to take this clump and fold it around the hook. So you can see I've just folded that around the hook, and then I'm going to take my thread with a very loose turn. One time all the way around, still loose. Second time all the way around, still loose. And then I'll tighten it down. And you can see I've pinched that down, and I've sort of made a veil around the front of the wing there. Now I'm going to take the dubbing that's sticking out the front and fold it back as well, and maybe take just a turn or two over that and then jump off that thread base. Now this is a good spot to use a dubbing brush to sort of sweep all that back, and you want that to encompass, again, if you're thinking deceiver, you want that to encompass the wing. That would be like the bucktail part of a deceiver. I've got a weird strand down here. Kind of brush all this back. Hate to have to do this, but that's gonna bug me if I leave that there. Clamp that back in the vise, and we're back in action. All right, so that collar goes all the way around, just nice and even. Now, one of the coolest parts on this is it's got a mallard flank feather wrapped in there for a little variegation. So what I've done is I've selected let me give you a whole one here, mallard flank feather, just natural gray, and I have prepped it by, let me unprep it, like so. I have pulled the tip, and I can kind of stroke these fibers out and create a separation point. And what I want to do, I've also stripped the fluff off the bottom there. What I want to do is tie this in just off that thread nub, 4 or 5 tight turns, and then this stub here, I'm going to fold back and catch it a couple more times with my thread as well. That just is a durability factor that makes a huge difference in how durable that fly will be. And I'll trim that stub out. Then I'm going to grab my hackle pliers. I'm going to wet my fingers and start to crease this feather back toward one side. This is like a wet fly style fold, and you can see I just broke that feather off. I'm glad that happened. I want you to see what to do when that does happen, and it happens more often than you think. I'm going to unwind the turns that I tied it down with originally, pull that out, and then I'm just going to grab just a few more fibers. You don't have to start over with a new feather. You can still use the same feather, like so, but you can see I've got some stem in there, and again, I'll catch that. I was just a little too close to that tip, apparently, and then I can fold this back again. And in the case of those just few fibers on this side that are sticking out, those are going to get blended into the collar, so I'm not worried about trimming those off. So we're going to try this again. I'm going to grab this with my hackle pliers, and I've got, again, the curve of the feather, the inside of the feather is toward the fly, and I'm going to stroke these fibers up and down as I preen them back to one side of the stem. Now, one thing you can do on these feathers is if you take the outside of your scissor blade and run it up that stem, that'll crease those fibers back very nicely to one side. See how nicely that did that? So now I'm going to build just, maybe 3 or 4 turns. We'll see if I get 4, probably 3 turns. 2.5 turns even, short feather, but that's still plenty of that mallard flank. And then I'm going to tie that off good and tight. And I can come in and trim that stem out. Get a few more turns over that just to anchor it, and you can see how close I am to the bead here. You don't want to. You kind of want to jam everything up. You don't want to push everything. Don't leave yourself plenty of room. You want to be kind of tight. So now I'll come in with my dubbing brush and kind of sweep that mallard back and just make sure it's all evenly distributed. I like what we've done here. Looking good. This slide just gets better and better looking as it goes on. Got one weird little fiber here I don't like, and I don't think I like those two. Kind of get them all going the same direction. You can see evenly all the way around. And then finally for the collar, this is the tricky part. So Keisha uses a Petitjean magic tool, which I have somewhere in my office here, and I just cannot find the darn thing. So I have, there is another tool from Hairline called a feather prepper that works in much the same way. Or I'll show you a way, just because I got a piece of this in the mail the other day. I'll show you a way, if you don't have either of those tools, how you can make one. What you do need is a clamp of some sort. This is a Stonfo feather clamp, is what I'm going to use here. You could use an Umpqua dubbing tweezer. Also, any sort of clamping tool like this is going to be imperative. But what I've used to do this, and what we've got is a couple of, let me get these here on the screen where you can see them, a couple of those Chickabou feathers folded into this, and I'll do a separate little piece showing you how to tuck these in. But I've just taken a piece of foam, this is just packing foam, came in an Amazon package, and I've cut a slit across it with a razor blade, and then you're going to tuck the 2 feathers down in, and we'll cut away and I'll show you how to tuck those feathers in on a separate video that we'll splice in here. It'll be like magic. Okay, I want to show you how to use a piece of foam instead of some fancy tool. The fancy tool does work a little better, a little more easy to work with, a little easier to work with, but just in case you're sitting at home and you want to tie the slide and you just got a piece of polystyrene packing foam, you can see what this looks like. This just happened to kind of come cut at this angle, this kind of teardrop shape. That's ideal because you can make multiple slits for depending on how long your feather is. But all I've done here is I've made a slit with a razor blade about a 1/4 inch deep or so, not terribly deep, and I'm going to set this down on my table, and then I'm going to select, in the case of this fly, for Keisha's fly, I'm going to use 2 of these Chickabou feathers, and I'm going to stack them one on top of the other, curves go in the same way, and kind of get their tips even. And what I like to do is kind of peel the fluff down off the bottom, so we've got just the long fibers left, like so. And then I'm going to take and grab the tips of both of these feathers. And let me get us lined up here on the camera. There we go. And I'm going to slide that stem down into that slit. You can see all these fibers are now on one side of the feather, so they're all facing up through here. You can kind of pull any out that got caught. Then you can come in with your clip and grasp those fibers. And then I find the trick to getting these out of here sort of cleanly and neatly is to bend this piece of foam a bit. See if I can do this so you can see it, like so. And that leaves the exposed stem. I can then come in and trim off like so. So I've got the fibers in my feather clip ready to go into the dubbing loop. That's the slickest, easiest way to do that. And you probably got this fancy tool sitting aside. If you'd like to buy one, I'd be happy to sell you one. Let us know. I think these are $14.95. There you go. Now you know. Let's get back to tying the fly. But anyway, once those are tucked in, we've got our feathers tucked in, then what I'll do, before anything else, what I'll do is I'm going to build a dubbing loop, because we want someplace to put these feathers when we're done. So I'm going to slide my material spring up, and I'm going to make about a 3-inch long dubbing loop. So that's about 6 inches of thread up over the hook, come around the base to close the loop, and then butt your thread right up against the bead. So I've got these 2 strands here. Here we go, 2 strands here. I'm going to take one leg and put it in my material spring on my near side, and that'll just hold that in place in the meantime. Then I'm going to take my prepped feathers here, and I'm going to grab them in my clamp, like so. Now the trick here is to bend the piece of foam where you can take this out, and you've got all the fibers on one side. I'm going to use a long-bladed pair of scissors to come in and trim the stem of that feather off, like so. So I've got all those fibers in my clamp. Then I'll come up, get my dubbing loop prepared. I'm going to turn this a bit so I can make sure you can see this. I'm going to put those fibers between the 2 strands in the dubbing loop, remove the clamp, pinch those tightly together, and spin my dubbing roll. Now I'm holding the loop closed with my fingers down here at the bottom, and I'll just let those fibers start to spin to create this big marabou soft hackle collar, like so. Now again, I like to use the dubbing brush just because it's on the desk and easy to make sure you got anything that was trapped in there that you get loosened up. This is a beautiful collar we're getting out of this feather, and I used 2 feathers there just for the record. And I'm going to start to wrap these. So I'm going to burn up that bare thread at the beginning of the loop. And as I wrap this, I like to think of this as a soft hackle. So I'm going to kind of fold these fibers back and put the next turn in front of it and the next turn in front of it, and we're going to jam right up to the bead. Get those last couple turns in there, right up to the bead to where I end with bare thread. And I'm going to take my tying thread up and over it, and if you listen, you can hear the thread pop that down and slide that thread off the back of the bead and anchor it in place. So get a good tight turn on there, 2 or 3 turns, clip that loop out. Then you can sort of smooth that collar back a bit. Wet your fingers just a bit to smooth the way. And then we're going to whip finish just behind the bead here. And again, anchor that down good and tight. Clip your thread, and you've got a mama's boy. That one came out beautifully. You did a good job there. I practiced. An interesting way to make a collar with a really very fish-shaped profile. This is a fly that you can fish slowly, kind of hop through runs in deep pools. It's heavy. It's relatively slender, as big as it seems. Its up-down profile is pretty slender. It's still got some volume to it, but not so much that it's going to inhibit its sink rate. Kind of clean that up a little bit. You can see very fishy profile. Cool little fly from Keisha. She's got some cool stuff. I'd watch for more. I'd watch for more from that whole family, honestly. But that's a cool one. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We've got all the stuff, and if you need it, you know where to come. But you guys, thanks for watching. I'm Charlie Craven.